Josh and Frankie.
What a couple of dumb shits.
Hello, Primates! You found Primus Tracks. Congratulations! This is not the only place you can find Primus Tracks. You can also find us at Primus Tracks on Instagram. PrimusTracksPod@gmail.com is the email address. There's also patreon.com/Primus Tracks if you'd ever want more Josh and Frankie, and I can't imagine who would, but there's a whole bunch of people over there who do. You can join them. There's also a Facebook page maintained by the guy who's joining me now. He's actually folding his clean socks. It's Frankie Berestein.
Hi, Josh. Have you noticed, Josh, how we keep content on Instagram and Facebook completely different?
Yes, it's our inducement to get people to give themselves up to the entire metaverse. We are disciples of Zuck.
Exactly.
My shares just plummeted, so I have to go get a second job. Yes, it's true. Frankie maintains the Facebook page. He won't give me the password, despite all my begging on bended knee. I usually run the Instagram, but Frankie jumps on there sometimes. But yes, two different places to get two different sets of content because we don't communicate about what we're posting.
Exactly.
It's a winning strategy.
It's a surprise for both of us when we see it.
Actually, that is 100% true. I'm often surprised by what I see on the Facebook page. It's a good time.
Yes.
Well, no Soya today. He's on the road, unfortunately. However, you've got Josh and Frankie. We'll survive. I think Soya had to take a nap after the Ask Soya episode anyway, so he's earning a well-deserved rest for his ears and his memory. Today we are going to talk about the second laundry record as we work our way through the chronology of non-Primus projects for our Primus principals, Les, Larry, and Tim. This is Laundry's Motivator from 1999. We'll get into that momentarily. But first, Frankie has breaking news.
All right. If you follow Primus Tracks on Facebook, you're probably familiar with the interview that we posted this morning. Very insightful, very interesting. But of course, the highlight is that there could be 4 releases in the horizon. Les confirmed that he's been working on new Primus. The third Claypool and on Delirium album is still in progress. The Billy Strings album is also cooking in the pot, and someone has been compiling material for a potential Frog Brigade live release, which would essentially be Live Frogs Volume 3. All 4 possibilities sound absolutely fantastic, but if you ask me personally, I'm most intrigued by the third Claypool and Delirium album. They've been working on that for a long time, and I think they're creating what could be the best album from this project based on how progressively amazing they have gotten with each release. For me, South of Reality blows Monolith of Phobos out of the water. So with all the time they've been focusing on this third release, I can only imagine how amazing it's going to be. And as you know, with Primus, we have the Fisherman Chronicles. With the Claypool and Delirium, we have the Cricket Chronicles. So I'm intrigued if there's going to be a third cricket track on the new album.
There, at some point, there's going to have to be a crossover where the fisherman uses the cricket for bait.
I agree.
Wow, 4 possible releases on the way of varying artists and lineups. And,
Primus could be just anything.
Yeah.
Either new material or less scratching something off his bucket list.
That's right. We know that some Primus Live material was also being compiled. So we could be seeing a lot of live releases. We could be seeing some studio work from any of these acts at any point. So late 2023, I'm rubbing my hands together to get ready for what promises to be an eventful late 23 and 2024. Frankie, get your travel plans ready. What else you got there? Something about there was a fancy dinner that we weren't invited to.
It was a very fancy dinner at a very long table where Les was sitting along with his idol and friend, Geddy Lee. I don't know about you, Josh, but anytime Les posts something about interacting with the guys from Rush, well, in this case, Cheney posted the photos. It doesn't matter if Les is in touch with these guys and he has met them countless times. Every time they hang out, the excitement is just so evident in the photographs. I think Les has never gotten over the fact that he became close to these guys.
I think it'd always be in the back of my mind, hey, I'm hanging out with Geddy Lee. I'm hanging out with Geddy Lee. That's sort of thought process. Yeah, it would be a little jarring every single time. But I guess they did a charitable wine dinner, and looks like everybody had a good time.
Yes. And, there are some really famous people who are not particularly interested in anyone else in the sense that they are fans of anyone. But in the case of Les, sometimes I wonder if he can be so cool with fans that meet him because he himself knows what it's like to be a fan.
Hey, that's a good point. He knows not to overdo it as a fan, so I'm glad he gives him a little leeway, the Joes and Marys. Thanks for that breaking news, Frankie. We can go back to our regular programming. It's time for miscellaneous debris. Recently, we had an episode about Bonnaroo 2008, Frankie.
You have to do the voice.
Let me do that again. Recently, we recorded an episode about Bonnaroo 2008, Frankie.
Excellent.
And I misidentified the bass that Les was using. Once again, not a gearhead, but our good friend Nick in the Netherlands is Mr. Know-It-All, because I identified the 4-string he was playing as the Carl Thompson replica that he had ordered, and it was not so. That was the original 4-string Carl. He was still busting it out in 2008. Nick in the Netherlands pointed out that the original has a black backing plate under the various knobs, whereas the replica does not. So that's what to look. Yeah, that's what to look for if you want to tell the difference between the two. And now I know. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you, dear experts who listen to our show. You always provide the insight that is elusive for Josh and I, who are not professional musicians. It was also pointed out, Josh, that this incredible lineup also performed on New Year's Eve of the same year.
That's right. Yeah, and you can check out that set list and lineup, of course, on Toasterland, the greatest site on the internet, other than the Primus Tracks Facebook page, of course, Frankie. And what a lineup, what a set list. It was cool that he got him back together for New Year's Eve, just a few months after the Bonnaroo experience.
Bonnaroo.
You're frighteningly good at that. So that's miscellaneous debris. Thank you so much for helping us out with some of these little details that we miss. You edify us. You build us up. You fill our brains with more useless knowledge than we even thought we had space for. Laundry, Frankie. I said you were folding your socks. That's a strange thing. I ball mine up. I take that back. I used to just ball mine up Now I just throw them in a drawer, and I don't care if they match. That is something I used to be obsessive about. This is laundry moment, by the way. I'm talking about socks. This is what y'all tuned in for. I used to be really obsessive about my socks, Frankie, pairing them up, rolling them up, getting them in the drawer, and I just dump them in and I don't care anymore. I don't know what shifted in my mind or my mindset, but it was liberating. I feel great.
What can I tell you? I fold mine.
You really do? Hey, that's the sign of an organized person. Congratulations to you. Apparently, I'm going the other direction. Well, we should talk about Laundry's Motivator, Laundry being the band led by Tim Alexander. Today is Motivator from 1999. This takes place 5 years after the first Laundry record, Frankie. Laundry returned as a three-piece. Toby Hawkins, no longer the vocalist, and up to the microphone steps Tim Alexander. So not only is he playing incredible drum parts over this record, he's also laying down the vocals. Must have been really tough to replicate live, but there is live footage out there. And it sounds like he nails it, as Tim always does. So precise. We still have, returning to Laundry, we have Tom Butler on guitar and Ian Varalia, hope I'm saying his last name correctly, on stick, the Chapman stick. But he's also on an instrument called a Warr, W-A-R-R guitar. Have you heard of these, Frankie?
No, what is that?
So these are monstrosities built by an individual who named them, and it might be his last name, W-A-R-R, these massive guitars that are 8, 10, 12 strings, and they are generally have bass strings on them, and you can do all kinds of wild things with that many strings. I think the most notable user of Warr guitars is Trey Gunn, a name you might know from his affiliation with Robert Fripp, King Crimson, and the like. And if you know anything about the demands that Robert Fripp puts on his musicians, you know that a Warr guitar or a Chapman stick is absolutely necessary. Have you ever seen Fripp live? I think you have.
I have met Robert Fripp, and I have seen him live.
Okay.
He has actually played his guitar right in front of me.
That's right. I vaguely recall you talking about this in the past. That's right. So you know that he will gather musicians who play very well on standard instruments, or will play, or who can play very well on unusual
Tony
instruments.
Levin, for Christ's sake.
Oh, Tony Levin, all-time great. And then Trey Gunn following in Levin's footsteps and just playing some dynamic, otherworldly stuff. For some reason, Tim Alexander is a draw for bassists and the like who are really into playing complex, complicated, action-packed music. I wonder why. It feels like to a degree, and I wonder if Tim felt this way, but it seems to a degree that he was typecast, as the drummer that could play with really hard-charging bassists. And maybe he wanted to break away from that after leaving Primus in '96 and doing some other things. But he ends up, playing in a band with a guy playing the Chapman stick who's playing some really cool stuff. And he ends up collaborating with Michael Manring a number of times. And if you haven't checked out Michael Manring, holy cow, I'm on a Manring kick myself right now. And but good players play with good players. That's just the way it goes. And those guys all made great music together as well.
2 first impressions, Josh.
Yeah.
The artwork is intriguing.
Yep.
And I can see that this CD is a reflection of its time with 2 hidden tracks.
Oh, that's right. There are a couple little hidden things in there. And if you're watching on the video over at patreon.com/Primus Tracks, there is the cover art right there. It is very late 90s, but it's also very mysterious, as far as the text of Laundry being pulled into well, it looks like some kind of mathematical modeling void. So it's quite esoteric in its application. I agree. And then also on the inside of the liner, you have our three principals' heads photoshopped onto these portraits. So, they look like they're ready for the Mexican Revolution. That's pretty cool. Looking like Pancho Villa there. So that's an interesting picture. I'm not sure whose idea that was, but if you have your Laundry Motivator CD, which was the only format on which it was released officially, Tim Alexander did end up throwing it on his website for a while as a free MP3 download here and there. But as far as I know, any website he ever had active is no longer active. Ginseng Drummer is long gone. TimAlexander.org does not exist as we know it. So good luck finding it. You can find this CD. It might run you a few bucks. But in the liner notes, Frankie, you're going to see a lot of familiar names who are thanked for their contributions to the laundry effort. Most notably, our pal Soya.
Cool.
So Soya is thanked. He was in a band at the time called Wingnut, and I think Laundry played some shows with Wingnut. And Soya told me he also tour managed Laundry on one of their runs with Tool. He couldn't remember what year that was, and I didn't look it up. So somewhere in there, I'm sure that there's a Toasterland equivalent for Tool tours. And if you want to look it up, go ahead. I'm probably not going to go down that hole. But they thank Tool, Merv, which is great. They thank Bored Naked, which is Herb's other band in which he would occasionally get on stage and play guitar. And they thank Wingnut as well, and a whole bunch of other bands that they gigged with. He also thanks Jerry Johnson, drum tech extraordinaire, and he also thanks the guys from Tool individually, among other people. So lots of familiar names on the thank you list. And I bring up Tool, Frankie, because once I start sampling the tracks, I think you'll hear it. which one sounds a lot like Tool. So we should though honor that Tool connection, and I think we did when we first spoke about Laundry. Tim got pretty friendly with the Tool guys. I'm sure that started on that Lollapalooza 93 run. And as Tool gained steam, Primus and Tool were crossing paths, and all the way up to 2022 and 2023 with the Primus benefit show for Jimmy Hayward. So, wow, what a long relationship these guys have had. But Tim, of course, played with A Perfect Circle ever so briefly. He played with Pussifer ever so briefly. So his work is reflected on those recordings as well here and there. I'm going to read from the Over the Electric Grapevine book, Frankie, which we haven't done in a while.
Yeah.
If you don't, go out and get Over the Electric Grapevine by Greg Prato. It's an oral history of Primus and Les Claypool. Pretty great stuff in there. We cite it when we can. Tim does say, upon leaving Primus, he says, after leaving Primus, Tim says, I really liked what I was doing in Laundry. The freedom and the style we were playing was just what I needed. I thought we could do something with it, but it seemed that doors weren't opening and the universe was saying no. So he gave it this effort, and it didn't go as planned, I suppose. He says, so during that is when the Perfect Circle stuff happened, but Josh Freese ended up doing it. Josh Freese, another extraordinary drummer, of course. So Tim was giving it a go with Laundry. I suppose the levels of success weren't up to his expectation. But as an overview for this record, as you may recall, Frankie, with Black Tongue, I used the word dour to describe the mood of that record. And for this one, I'm going to use another four-letter word, grim. It just has a grim sound to it. It's dark, again, it's heavy, but it sheds most of the prog elements that we heard in Black Tongue and is more straight ahead in its rock tones. And the lyrics, not as Byzantine as what we got from Toby Hawkins, but they certainly tread similar ground around the mundane elements of our lives, being pushed around by other people, or essentially just being lost and confused. And I suppose in 1999, those lyrics, they had to come from somewhere, and I suppose Tim might have been mining his own personal feelings for some of this.
So Josh, after years of being used to Tim being an essential part of the band, but still always wanting to be low profile and avoiding any kind of attention, what was your first impression when you heard him sing on this album?
My first impression upon hearing this record, and I remember hearing it not long after it was released, I was impressed. Tim was hitting his notes. There was some processing on his voice, and when I say that, I mean there was a lot of. It seems like there's a lot of reverb and other effects on his voice, and I don't know if that's to strengthen it because he felt like it needed it, but it sounds pretty good to me. Not as forceful as Toby Hawkins with the Black Tongue release. It doesn't sound like Tim is pussyfooting around. He's delivering on it. We're definitely going to sample those Tim Alexander vocals here in a moment. And the good news is, I guess they got him warmed up so he could sing backup on Pilcher Squad in 2003. How about that?
I'm looking forward to the samples, actually.
I pulled 4 tracks for you to sample today, Frankie. Full disclosure, you have not heard this record, correct?
That's right.
All right. So I picked 4 tracks that are my favorite, or that really spoke to me and showed some of the more dynamic elements of this record for you, Frankie, and for you, primates, who haven't heard this before. So first is track 2. We're going to listen to the opening and the first verse of the track, This Time.
Wow. Absolutely blown away by Tim's vocals. That was really unexpected.
Yeah, he sounds confident, doesn't he?
Yeah, I mean, judging by the way that he sometimes provides backing vocals for Primus, I never expected him to do something so melodic and confident, as you said.
He's putting it out there, and that's what I appreciate about him here. And I always go to this track. This is kind of my go-to track to show people Laundry because of that drum fill to open things up and just how Tim is making a lot of noise on the kit. And it's not noise to make noise. It's noise that makes sense. And that's one thing that Tim has done well throughout his entire career. He doesn't waste any notes. And so what he's doing there is really big and really powerful. And that's, in a sense, and especially the way it's recorded, to compare it to Black Tongue, which was a bit more finesse, I think, in its recording. This one is plowing straight ahead and has a huge sound on those drums. As far as the music, what do you think?
I would like to hear more.
I'm glad I've already gotten your attention with This Time. And by the way, at the very end, you get some really nice drumming ear candy with Tim going off the deep end a bit. But you have to go out and find it. By the way, this is all available on YouTube. There are plenty of people that have uploaded this record.
Thanks, people.
The next track I would like to sample is simply called Day, D-A-Y. Based on the lyrics, this is one of the tracks that's about the mundacity of daily life and just how empty it truly feels when you look at it, I suppose, from a macro perspective. We're going to hear about 30 seconds of this one because it's got 3 distinct parts that I very much enjoy.
I mean, it sounds really great, but if you didn't mention that Herb is singing and what the band is, I mean, judging by the fact that I had never heard this record before, if somebody played that for me, I would instantly recognize it as a product of the 90s, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it does have a sound of its time.
And that can be hard to describe for sure, or hard to quantify, but I think I'm picking up what you're putting down there. It has a vibe to it. What I really appreciate about that particular part in Day, the track that gives us 3 distinct parts there, it's reminiscent to me of the first record. That little athletic guitar lick on top of what Herb's doing on drums, and then the interlude with that odd time and percussive dun dun dun, and then going into a third part that's dialing it back a bit and starting to create some atmosphere. So Day has a lot going for it. And of course, lyrically, once again, it is grim. Essentially the pointlessness of day-to-day life. This is not an uplifting record lyrically, Frankie, but the music is wonderful. The next track I'd like to sample is the next track on the record. It's track 6, and it's called What Is Great. I guess the reason it's interesting to me is lyrically, there is some repetition in the lyrics of I, me, myself. I, me, myself standing up straight. I, me, myself saying what is great. I, me, myself, I'm not clear again, and I hesitate. Once again, I've given up on me and mine. Grim. But that I like the repetition of I, me, myself. Let's hear some of What Is Great and see if we can answer that question. Pretty rad opener. I'm going to forward to about a little over halfway into the track. Check this out. Atmosphere.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
So you have a solid drum groove, you have a big bass sound putting down a cool lick, and you have dissonant guitars. Who does that sound like?
What else could you ask for?
What else could you ask for? Really cool stuff there. I appreciate that. And, Tim's playing... I think the time, I haven't counted it out. The time signature seems pretty straightforward, but the way he's playing it sounds like he's playing it in a really odd time. But I could be wrong about that because I didn't sit there and count it out. I was just enjoying the track. So what is great? That vibe right there. A lot of atmosphere. I remember the first time I listened to this, way back at the turn of the century, Frankie, I felt like it was more monolithic, like it was all just these huge slabs of heavy rock. But there is, from time to time, there is a pocket of atmosphere where things slow down or meander, and they do some exploring. So I can, yeah.
What mood do you have to be in to spin this record?
All right. Me personally?
Yeah.
I do appreciate the more aggressive element to it, and so I like listening to it when I am trying to accomplish a task. What I should do is load it onto my mobile and take it to the gym with me, and that might increase my deadlift by a good 30 pounds when I'm rocking this out. I don't know. You never know. So that's a good question. I think it's wonderful for task completion. It's not background music by any means, but it's there to help me get the energy up. Where do you see yourself listening to this, Frankie? At the laundromat while you're folding your socks?
I see myself playing it and then focusing on it. I wouldn't multitask by doing something and listening to it. It sounds like, my first impression is that it's a very demanding record. So you need to sit down and take it in.
That's something we pointed to with Black Tongue as well. It really commands your attention. As a side note, Black Tongue received a lot of positive reviews, especially from prog rock fans who discovered it and praised its prog sensibilities. This record was also fairly well received by those who picked it up, but they did note the difference in direction. But you nailed it, Frankie, that both of them command your attention because of the intricacies that are on display. It is one that I did sit and concentrate on it at first, and I'm not sure why I came away from it thinking, wow, it's all just these slabs of rock. So there's a lot more going on a number of years later now as I give it a more serious listen. All right, one more track to sample. This one is called So Cool. Mean. What I really like is a track by a bunch of adults called So Mean. Well, let's find out what that's about. I'm going to play about a minute of this one, Frankie, and you tell me, close your eyes and listen. You tell me who this ballpark could sound like if you didn't know it was laundry.
The guitar reminds me of what Adrian Belew was doing when I saw him live a decade ago. And the drums and the bass are utterly Tool-esque.
Tool is where I was going. Your poll on Adrian Belew, I think, is apt. With the churning bass, the drums kind of giving that illusion of an off-kilter time, and going with that syncopation. Yes, very Tool-esque. And then the guitars, I was thinking Adam Jones does that kind of, especially that middle part you heard, where he's hitting that really frayed edge chords, very Adam Jones-esque. But I can hear Belew in that too, especially the dissonant parts. To me, this is almost like the missing bridge between Tool and Primus, because I can hear elements of both in there with those churning bass lines and what have you. But Belew is an interesting pull there, and I think it works.
Thank you.
Yeah, so you can see why they toured with Tool and were palling around with Tool for quite some time, it seems. It is a bummer it didn't work out. I think this band had made a couple of nice recordings and could have kind of cracked the code as far as this kind of demanding rock music that does make you sit up and pay attention. Well, they're not doing any Fibonacci sequence stuff, or metaphysical proselytizing or what have you. So maybe that was what was missing, which is something that Tool had going for them. But anyhow, unfortunately, this is the last Laundry record, and we probably won't get another one. But revisiting it now for me, and I definitely want to hear your thoughts, Frankie, this being your first exposure, and where your mind's going with it. But for me, it's a very enjoyable listen, and obviously 3 guys who know what the hell they're doing, and they play really well together.
It's a highly intriguing record based on the samples that you played. I'm definitely going to give it a spin and focus on the tracks. But what I wanted to say is that when you think about these Laundry albums, plus his guest appearances with A Perfect Circle, for instance, and the fact that he was even in Blue Man Group,
right,
and of course, Primus, just gives you an overview of what a fascinating, eclectic, and unexpected career Tim Alexander has had. And yet he is so understated, modest, I would say, and even overlooked to a degree.
And prolific. He's on a ton of records in the last 30-odd years. And so many of them seem to have flown under the radar. And he is not a self-promoter, which is what you pointed to with his modesty. You have to go out of your way to a degree to find these recordings. I do remember that they were kind enough over at PrimusSucks.com back in the late 90s. There was a link that said, see what Herb's been up to, and it was a link to the Laundry website, which was a nice bone to throw him to get people over in his direction. But it does take some effort it did then and it does now especially to seek out and find these CDs with his name on them somewhere in order to enjoy them at their maximum quality. So, Tim, I'd love to talk to that guy about these projects because there's so many. And I just get the impression that in a lot of interviews, it's kind of hard to speak in the moment when you're being interviewed for something. And when I was a younger guy, Tim's answers to interview questions came off as clipped and curt, as if he didn't want to be there. But I think he was just answering the questions the way he knew how. And he didn't expound a lot on what he had to say. And so, to me,
if you want some real insight from Tim, I think one of the best interviews he ever did was an interview with Brain. I don't think there was any journalist involved. It reads exactly like a conversation, an informal conversation between Brain and Herb. And it's really fascinating. I guess because Tim felt he was speaking to a peer, because he was hanging out with another musician, his answers were not as curt. He actually expands quite a bit on several topics on that interview. And it has one of my all-time favorite Curve moments. His cell phone starts ringing, and he tells Brain, "That's my chicks."
See, Tim can ad-lib. That's good. I like that. Now, is this an audio recording or a text conversation?
It's a text interview.
I think I recall this one. It's been some time since I read it. I'm going to have to go back and find it. I think that's someone that's readily available on the internet still, correct?
Curve and Brain, 2 drummers looking for love and talking trash in an East Bay pool hall.
Oh, yes. I remember this one very well. And this is on Jim Wade's Primus page.
Yes, and it's incredibly extensive.
I think we've credited Jim Wade before on this podcast. He maintained a Primus page in the 90s and early aughts, and it's still up. Search for Jim Wade's Primus page.
It's a treasure trove.
You will not regret it. There's so much great stuff on there. It is like a time capsule almost. Great conversation between Herb and Brain on that one. I'm starting to remember it. So we sampled This Time, Day, What Is Great, and So Mean from Laundry's Motivator. But Frankie, I have to give a shout out to one more track, and it is simply titled Turd Bowlers. I don't know what that means, but I can tell you with certainty that there are no lyrics to Turd Bowlers. So I guess you have to use your imagination. By the way, this one I think they had to release independently because I did read an interview with Tim in which he said he was shopping this record around, and the label that is credited here on the back of your CD is Rinse and Repent Records, which I believe is just a self-release label that they used. Because I couldn't find anything else on Rinse and Repent, which is a really funny name, by the way. Rinse and Repeat, Rinse and Repent, Laundry. It all comes together, Frankie. Puns! Well, that's Laundry's Motivator. I'm motivated. I'm going to go put this music on and lift the heaviest weights I can find, and I'll report back from the hospital, Frankie, and we'll have a good time. So I encourage everybody to go check this one out on YouTube, and if you can find the CD, go for it. It's a very nice recording. Final thoughts?
Final thoughts. You piqued my curiosity with this record. As I mentioned before, I was familiar with the first Laundry album, but not this one. And I think this could be a contender for my favorite Laundry album. So I'm going to give it a spin because it sounds really fascinating.
Right on. We're actually kind of in a Tim Alexander mode here because the next episode we're going to talk about another one of his projects called Attention Deficit. And I listening to this Laundry record and getting started on listening to Attention Deficit again for the first time in a little bit, boy, are they different. So we're going to see his dynamism on display here between this week and next time. So, Tim Alexander, double thumbs up for drumming and singing on Laundry's Motivator. I would listen to more records with him on vocals. Sounds great.
Absolutely.
So Laundry...
His chicks would agree.
His chicks would agree, is that what you said? So, Motivator, say no more. I'm motivated. And you've been tracked. Frankie, next time, chuck the Ritalin, because we already have attention deficit.
Yeah, I went through that.
Personal experience is important in that realm. Thank you, Primates. That's Laundry's Motivator. Later days.
Willie Mays.